Damien Echols is proof there's life after death.
I can only see 4, maybe 5 inches in front of my face without these glasses. It's due to being enclosed in a very small space for so many years. So your eyes are just like any other part of your body. If it doesn't get use, it starts to wither away. And that's what happened to my eyes.
Do you mind taking them off for the interview? Can
Sure.
you?
Yes.
But you can't see me very well?
I can see that there's a person there. It's just color and movement.
Just a little over a year ago, Echols was facing execution on Arkansas's death row.
You sleep on concrete, you walk on concrete, you sit on concrete. It wears the joints of your body out. You're living with death hanging over your head at any moment, and all of those things combined wear you down.
And then in August of 2011, after spending nearly 2 decades in Arkansas prisons, Damien Echols and 2 other men were suddenly released as part of a highly unusual plea deal, which we'll explain later. Echols, Jason Baldwin, and Jesse Miss Kelly are the West Memphis 3. In 1993, they were teenagers living in West Memphis, Arkansas, when they were arrested and later convicted of a horrific crime, the murders of 3 little boys.
The community exploded. People were living in absolute horror, trying to keep their kids off the street, not wanting to walk anywhere by themselves at night. People lived in terror.
There was no physical evidence connecting Echols or the others to the killings. And in fact, since then, considerable evidence has surfaced that supports their innocence. But in West Memphis, a person with a partially shaved head, black clothing, and interest in the occult stood out.
A lot of it was just the way I looked. And in a really small, extremely conservative, right-wing town, they say automatically, well, you must be a Satanist. Therefore, we don't put anything past you.
We, the jury, after careful deliberations, have determined that Damien Echols shall be sentenced to death by lethal injection.
The trial was nothing, he says, compared to what he faced on death row.
Most people have nothing like that in their frame of reference. Having to live every single moment of your life on guard, even while you're sleeping. You never go into a deep sleep. You always have to be ready for the next person that's going to try to hurt you.
When I interviewed Echols as part of a 48 hours report on the case, he was spending nearly 24 hours a day in solitary confinement. He kept daily journals, which are now part of a new book. After an Emmy Award-winning documentary about the trial was shown on HBO in 1996, Echols' life changed once again when supporters from all over the country began contacting him.
Sometimes people have callings in life, and this was mine. And so I couldn't not hear it. I couldn't not go.
Lori Davis, a landscape architect living in New York, even moved to Arkansas to work on the case.
I had to do whatever I could to get this man out of prison. That's what I had to do.
And she wasn't alone.
Johnny just called me one day, just out of the blue, just cold called me.
Hello, this is Johnny Depp?
He did, yeah.
And you said?
I'd heard that he was interested in the case and that he was interested in helping.
I'm so positive.
Depp explained on 48 Hours why he and others connected to Echols' situation.
He comes from a small town in Arkansas. I come from a, relatively small town in Kentucky. As a teenager, as a kid growing up, I can remember being kind of looked upon as a freak, if you will, or, different, because I didn't dress like everybody else or because I didn't look like everybody else.
And then in December 2010, with mounting evidence pointing to the innocence of the West Memphis 3, the Arkansas Supreme Court ordered a new hearing, a hearing both costly and potentially embarrassing for state officials. And that brings us to the unusual plea deal.
At this point in time, I want to proceed with the offered plea.
The idea of Stephen Braga, a highly respected appeals attorney who volunteered his services.
It's called an Alford plea. It's basically a compromise where both sides, 2 sides that have been at war for 18 years in this case, decide that we want to end the case.
In return for agreeing not to sue the state, the 3 men were released from prison. But here's the bizarre part. While they could continue to insist they were innocent, each had to plead guilty. Didn't it feel a little like a deal with the devil?
It was a deal with the devil, but it was also a deal I really didn't have any choice but to take if I wanted to live. My health was going fast. I was dying in there. I knew if I didn't take that deal, I was never going to live to see outside those walls.
You'll be each sentenced to serve 18 years and 78 days on a charge of first-degree murder with full credit for that time already served.
Do you believe the state would have let them out if any state official really believed that they did this?
No.
So it doesn't really add up to what people think of as justice.
This is not a just result. This is a compromise result. A way for me to save Damien's life and get him off death row. But it's a compromise that sometimes you have to hold your nose because it stinks a little bit, because it's not justice.
Echols' joy at his release after 18 years in prison was widely covered by the media, but not the fears that followed when he left Arkansas for a new life in New York City.
It's just like this free-floating anxiety. I've been injected into this whole new world, and I'm having to learn everything. There's fear constantly. Fear you're going to get lost. Fear you're going to say the wrong thing just because you're not used to social interaction.
It's the simplest things that most people would take for granted that he had never done before.
Lori Davis went from seeing Echols once a week to 24 hours a day. Yes, she married him in 1999 while he was on death row.
I believed in his innocence, and then I fell in love with him, and those two things together, nothing else mattered.
All that matters now, says Lori, is helping him adjust to a world that has moved on without him.
Filling out a deposit slip, being able to go from one address to another, and reading a map. He's never done any of those things.
And does he become frustrated when he doesn't know things?
He wants to be able to move about in the world on his own and not have to rely on me, and that's frustrating to him, but it'll come.
And the reality is, 37-year-old Echols may be out of prison, but he's not free. He remains a convicted felon. You're going to have a hard time getting a job.
Exactly.
It may not work with everybody to say, oh yeah, I was convicted of murder, but I didn't do it.
Exactly.
Which may explain why he spends so much time here.
This is Sacred Tattoo Gallery.
Among tattoo and graffiti artists.
These are people who are sort of marginalized by society, who aren't part of, the mainstream. These are people who tattoo people. They're not people who put on business suits and go into work every day.
I see, though, that spending time with tattoo artists is rubbing off on you.
It is.
Echols' notoriety is not likely to end soon. Besides his book, there is a new documentary coming out in December and a Hollywood movie in production. But this month, Damien and his wife moved to a town where they think they'll fit in just fine. Salem, Massachusetts. A town that knows too well the terrible consequences of misjudging people. Is there a time when you just want to be known as Damien Echols and not one of the West Memphis Three?
That's one of my driving forces in life right now. I want to do things that stand on their own merit, that people appreciate, that mean something to people, that move them in some sort of way. That's what I want to be defined by, not by what was done to me.